Hey guys, it's me, Ree, and today we're going to be talking about Stephenie Meyer's book, Midnight Sun. Now, as many of you might know, this is a book in the Twilight series. This is the first book told from Edward Cullen's perspective as opposed to Bella's. And this book has been through a lot. Stephenie Meyer started writing this probably years ago, and a draft that she wasn't particularly proud of got leaked. And she called off this project. She called it off indefinitely, I believe, because she just felt so discouraged by that. And for a while on her website, I believe she had like the first few chapters of this book up. And it was really cool and a lot of people liked it. And so she was like, I guess I'll start doing it again. And right when she was ready to start back up on Midnight Sun, E.L. James announced her book, Grey, which is the first book of the 50 Shades of Grey series, told from Christian's perspective. So Stephenie Meyer was once again really discouraged about this, and then finally this year we got Midnight Sun. Now, I was kind of wary about this book. I knew I was going to get it because I was a huge Twilight fan when I was in the 5th grade. It was one of the first book series I really got into. It was definitely like the first YA book I was reading. And it got me into reading got me less scared of reading like thicker books, because when I was little I just read a lot of like shorter classic books, Harry Potter, stuff like that. And this was like the first book to get me into more mature books and definitely inspired my love of reading a lot more. So it does mean a lot, like Twilight does mean a lot to me, but there are definitely some problematic aspects in it. Problematic aspects in Bella and Edward's relationship, the treatment of natives, stuff like that. And yeah, so I was a little bit concerned going in, like, how is Stephenie Meyer going to deal with this, because Twilight's pretty old at this point. It's like 10 years old, and so it was the first book she wrote. It's the first book she wrote, so I was hoping she would have matured a lot as an author, and I definitely thought, like, I believe like she would be able to cover this stuff pretty well. And I have to say, you can definitely tell she has matured as an author. Edward is such a fun narrator to follow along with, and she's definitely made him a lot more likable. He's very funny in a very sarcastic, dry way, and his mind is just such an interesting place to be in, because he hears everybody and you get his perspective on so many things in the series that you just didn't think about. I know a lot of people think that the Cullens are the most interesting part of the Twilight series, and I would definitely agree with that. They have a very interesting backstory. If Stephenie Meyer knows how to, like, Stephenie Meyer is so good at world building. She gives us the most interesting backstories for characters, but unfortunately in Twilight, those characters were always, like, in the background, because we had Bella and Edward at the top, but in this series we get a lot of input. We get a lot from, like, Carlisle, we get a lot from Esme, we get a lot from the siblings, we get inside their minds, because Edward literally, he just reads their minds all the time. And that's how he communicates with them. We get a lot about Alice and how her visions work. We get a lot... What is blinking? Okay, I was like... We get a lot from Alice and how close her and Edward are, and it's such a great relationship. But one thing that kind of bothered me about Edward is that this internalized misogyny that comes out in the Twilight series is definitely still there in Midnight Sun. His opinion on Jessica Stanley is not great, and it's always kind of dumbing her down to this like this stereotypical popular girl. Her thoughts are always just targeted against Bella. Like, she's always pitted against Bella, even though like they're friends, and she's just, that's all Edward like thinks of her, is this like he's always pitting her against Bella, and her thoughts are always just about how Bella is this threat to her, and it's not fun. Like, at first it was like, okay, yeah, we get it. And then throughout the course of the book, he just keeps going into Jessica's brain, and it's just like, I'm done hearing about how, like, Jessica hates Bella, and how Edward in turn hates Bella. And that was one thing that bothered me. The other thing that I will warn people against in the beginning, Rosalie is like the same exact way. Her character is just there to hate Bella for a while, and just there to be like, oh, we don't need, like, we don't need a human here. She's just gonna ruin everything. what are you doing, Edward? And it's just, she's just constantly like, she's just a bitch for like the first part of the book, and she gets on your nerves, and just the treatment of her is just not that great. But I will say that Stephenie Meyer kind of acknowledges this, and she does her best to like characterize Rosalie later on and give her this scene where she's super powerful. So as I was saying about Rosalie, in the beginning you kind of like, she's kind of treated badly. I didn't like the way she was treated at all. She was always kind of like pitted against Bella and Edward, which she is throughout the series, but I think a lot of people after the original series came out were like, Rosalie has a point and she's treated horribly. So Meyer kind of gives us a scene between Edward and Rosalie where we learn more about Rosalie and more about her background, more about her jealousy of not being able to be as human as, not being as human as Bella, not being human at all, and how Bella has all these opportunities. Paris is like walking around down here. Bella has all these opportunities that Rosalie is never going to get. So I think that kind of made things, that kind of softened the blow of this unnecessary just treatment of her. And another thing is that Edward actually likes Jacob at first. He thinks his mind is like a really pleasant place and he's a really nice guy. And I don't think the treatment of Jacob's tribe is, in the reservation, is kind of, I just think that Meyer avoided that a lot. Like, she does acknowledge, like, yeah, La Push, and like, yeah, there's this treaty, but Billy's warnings are kind of at first just like, oh, it's just an old man's superstitions, they're never gonna believe him. And then it just gets more annoyed, and Edward just gets annoyed with him, but like, Jacob is just kind of like, oh, it's just this kid, he's never gonna believe him, like, he's a very nice guy, he's nice to Bella, oh, he has a crush on her, I'm not surprised. And then at the end it's kind of like, I'm getting a little jealous. So I think like she tried to kind of soften that blow as well. It was kind of iffy. Like, I'm a little, if this continues, which I don't think we're gonna get any more books in Edward's perspective, I don't know. I'm curious as to how that's gonna be treated, because that tribe is real and La Push is real. There's actually a reservation. I think she's gonna, from now on, avoid it, because a lot of people have spoken, rightfully spoken, about the treatment of that in the book, because you're making merchandise and like capitalizing off of that, and it's kind of wrong. But I definitely think she tried to make it better. I think those were the only things that kind of got, well, the stalking is talked about, and I think she tried to soften that blow too by saying that Edward just felt this need to protect her, and he was bored at night and he thought she was interesting. And yeah, it's still creepy, and he is creepy in those moments, but he acknowledges that he's creepy. She did the best she could with that. I think it was one of those things where she couldn't completely erase it because it was in the original, it was such a big part of the original, so she did what she could to kind of make it better. Those parts were a little bit creepy when he was stalking her, because he does like follow her during the day too. Like, he watches her in her backyard while she's reading, and yeah, that was creepy, and that bothered me a little bit. But there were other parts of this narrative that were really great. We find out things that we couldn't have known in Twilight. How Edward interacts with his classmates. For example, he does read Angela's mind, Bella's friend Angela, and he really likes it there. He thinks she's very nice. Like Jacob, he really likes being in her mind because she's very pleasant. All she thinks about is like her family, and she's very selfless, and she only thinks about others, and he kind of tries to like go deeper in her mind to see if he can like do something nice for her. So he recruits Emmett to like help him try to do something nice for her. I don't want to give away too much, but he does try his best to like do something nice for her and help her. You find out more about that night, and that Bella is almost assaulted. Carlisle's told about it, and him and Edward do try to like take care of that in a way that doesn't involve Edward just going completely violent. We do get to hear more about like Edward's past, his backstories. Oh my god. My crown just fell. Just more about that kind of stuff, and it's very nice to hear about the Cullens, because they are the most interesting part of Twilight. You hear more about his relationship with Carlisle, more about Alice, more about Rose, even like more about Emmett and Rosalie. I wish I would have been a little bit more about Rosalie and Emmett, because I never really felt convinced that they were a couple. Like, I knew they were, and like they had their cute moments, like how Rosalie saved him. But when it comes down to it, like Carlisle and Esme, I was convinced about. Jasper and Alice, I was convinced about. Edward and Bella, I was convinced about. But I feel like Emmett and Rosalie kind of got the shaft, because Rosalie's just so obsessed with being human that we don't even really have any of those cute moments between the two of them, which I know they're there because Rosalie really does love Emmett. She does say that, but they lack the cute moments that the other couples have. And even when they're in the house, like the part where Bella visits, there's this really cute moment where we hear Esme's thoughts, because she doesn't leave the house and she kind of relies on her children and Carlisle to bring humanity to her. And so Edward bringing Bella was kind of her way of connecting with humans and learning. And at one point we hear like her think, "Oh, she's so lovely, thank you for bringing her to me." And it's a really touching moment. So yeah, and I think the ending where James is tracking them and trying to hunt Bella, that was actually handled pretty well. That whole moment, because Bella's out for most of it, like after she's unconscious, after she's hurt, even like the time where she's with Alice and Jasper. In this version, Meyer kind of turns into like this action sequence, and like we find out so much, and it's this really fast-paced action sequence. It's really interesting and well done. So I guess when it comes down to it, the question you all have is like, should you read this book? Yes, I think so. If you were a fan of Twilight, or even if you're not a fan of Twilight, if you're a fan of Twilight, definitely read this. It's a good read. It kind of takes you back to that nostalgia you had, and it's really interesting. It's kind of like, oh, like it's this like aha moment, like, oh, I didn't even think about that, or I wouldn't even thought of how Edward was thinking now, because Bella kind of idolizes him, and she doesn't pick up on a lot of his humor at times. She's so scared of offending him that she misses out on things, and the whole time you kind of, in her shoes, you kind of feel like, oh, he's intimidating. And this whole time, he's kind of like, this mortal is insane. And it's really a great thing. It kind of makes Bella a lot more interesting, because to him, she's so interesting. Even like her home, Arizona, her opinions on things, she's 1,000 times more interesting as a character than she was as a narrator. And Meyer has this way of making her more interesting. You can definitely tell her tone, her writing has matured a lot. She's able to turn this into like, I think this book was a lot more interesting than Twilight. She does her best to rectify some problematic elements. Yeah, if you're not into Twilight, I mean, I don't think you should read this. If you are completely adamant that you're never gonna like Twilight, I don't see the point in reading it. But if you're kind of if you're kind of iffy about it, I definitely think this is a great read. It goes pretty fast, even though it's over 600 pages. 658 pages, but I finished it in like 3 days. I was working too, so I didn't have like a lot of time to read. But I enjoyed it. I had fun. I didn't feel like ugh the whole time. There were some parts that were kind of cringy, but like, it's a YA vampire book. I don't know if I'm really the demographic anymore. It's definitely more mature than it was. I think Stephenie Meyer has kind of loosened up over the years too. Like, she's realized her audience is a bit older, so she can say certain things. But like, in general, I think I'm past the Twilight audience. And I still enjoyed it. Yeah, go in with an open mind. Edward is a super fun narrator, and he's a super fun character. And when you're not in Bella's extremely mature for her age, like kind of holier than thou at times brain, he's fun. He's really fun. This book is fun. And yeah, let yourself have fun reading it. Kind of put the Twilight cringe out of your brain and just have fun. Bring your own opinions. If you've read it, comment below what you thought. Let's have a discussion. I'm always happy to discuss books, so yeah, let me know what you thought, and if you want to read it, let me know. If this convinced you to read it, let me know. And until next Friday, have a fantastic week.